Witam Państwa na...
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to offer my words to Our Lady of Fatima to be her useful tool during the conference, not to say anything that wouldn't be pleasing to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, using the fact that our conference is translated into English, the subject, Errors of Russia, talking about it, I would like to also present certain developments in the Polish history, so our Polish participants may be very well familiar with these topics. But I think that the context of the apparitions in Fatima will help us look on certain things in a different way, and we hope that our foreign visitors will also be able to understand the very special situation of Poland that was very difficult, especially during the last century. Well, before I start talking about Poland and errors of Russia, I would like us to consider the circumstances in which Our Lady of Fatima mentions Russia. Russia is mentioned for the first time on the 13th of August 1917, and it's a very special apparition it wasn't August, pardon, it was July. It starts with a vision of hell to which poor sinner souls go to, and God wants to popularize devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If you do what I recommend, humankind will be preserved from hell. However, if people will continue offending God during the pontiff of Pius XI, another war shall start. There will be persecution of the Church and Pope. I will come and ask for consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart and Holy Communion on the first Saturdays of each month. If my recommendations are satisfied, Russia will convert and peace will reign. If not, godless propaganda will disseminate its ugly teaching around the world. The good will be martyred. The Holy Father will suffer a lot, and different nations will be annihilated. At the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and for some time peace will be in the world, and Portugal will always observe the dogma on faith. Well, a very interesting vision, and I'm not a priest, so I will not elaborate on it. I will rather talk about the situation of Russia. Here, I just wanted to attract attention to two aspects. Talking about Russia, Our Lady refers our attention to two things: conversion of Russia to Catholic religion, so doctrine errors, and also godless propaganda, war, and persecution of the Church. So here we have two aspects which may seem to refer to different areas: religion on the one hand and the land issues on the other. However, in the apparition of Fatima, these two aspects, the mundane and the religious dimensions, are strictly connected with each other. Conversion of Russia to true faith is a precondition for peace on earth, life of people, and existence of many nations. The words of Our Lady of Fatima clearly show how important dogmatic issues are and persistence of single true religion. We also here see that the Orthodox doctrine differs from Catholic one. They don't accept the dogma on Immaculate Conception of the Holy Mother, which is so strongly highlighted during Lourdes apparition when the Holy Mother said, "I'm Immaculate Conception." Filioque also coming of the Son from Godfather. So here we have a reference to the importance of conversion. If Russia is not consecrated to the Immaculate Heart, the world situation will be impacted. Here in the photo you can see an interesting juxtaposition. You have Marx on one hand and the miracle of Son in Fatima. Why such a juxtaposition? The godless propaganda of Russia was impacted by the philosophy of a German writer Marx, who said the infamous sentence that religion is opium for people. The sentence comes from a text that was published in 1943, and it was just a standing point on the criticism of the Hegelian doctrine. Marx says religion is a side of poor creature, the heart of the world. Religion is an opium for people. Elimination of religion as an illusion of happiness is in fact a request for real happiness. So Marx can see in liquidation of religion an attainment of happiness by the humankind. And afterwards, a very interesting metaphor. Marx uses the metaphor of sun, or basically two suns. He says as follows: the criticism of religion liberates us from illusion so that we can act and shape our own reality as a person free of illusion and attaining common sense to move around its own axis, around its real sun. Religion is only an illusion of a sun that moves around the man as long as the man is not rotating along its own axis. So Marx makes this metaphor: the external sun is fake, the religion that you have to eliminate, and you have to focus on yourself. And basically, it's very much in line with what the Masonry claims. This is the vision of a devil. The devil says, in paradise you will be by yourself like God. And the Holy Mother, with the miracle of sun, responds also to the words of Marx, showing that the external sun, while we have the magnificent vision, the miracle, well, today we celebrate the anniversary of this incredible event, 102nd anniversary of the miracle of sun on the 13th of October, when people are petrified and sun is circulating the sky and nearly hitting against the crowd that's mesmerized. So how much it differs from the words of Marx, who claimed that the sun is just an illusion. And Holy Mother shows it clearly how true religion is, and this miracle shall in fact be enough for conversion. Unfortunately, Marx's philosophy attains greater and greater popularity. Communism is spreading, and basically only just a couple of weeks after the last apparition of Our Lady of Fatima, we see the Bolshevik Revolution, communists assume power in Russia. And ladies and gentlemen, you don't hear about it too often, but at that time in Orthodox Russia, as for all Catholics, the biggest group of Catholics were in fact Poles. And here we have a chart. At that time, at the time of Bolshevik Revolution, there was 1,650,000 Catholics, out of which as many as 1,100,000 were Polish people. So when the persecution started, which basically started on the second day after the Bolshevik coup, certain laws were introduced. Church was expropriated. At that time, Polish Archbishop Jan Cieplak, who was in Russia, he was imprisoned together with Gutkiewicz priest, and two of them were sentenced to capital punishment. Jan Cieplak survived, whereas Ksiądz Gutkiewicz was killed, and also many other priests were killed or sent to concentration camps. Cloisters were closed down, and they were turned into so-called museums of atheism. And also, Polish people were first, well, because there were so many Catholics in Russia at that time. So Polish people were first to try and tell the world about the errors of Russia, about persecution of church at that time. Unfortunately, communistic authorities tried to silence them and said that Poland only used this for their political objectives. And they claimed that nothing bad happened to the Catholic Church in Russia. On the 15th of August 1920, incredible event, which is called the miracle at the Vistula River. Holy Mother appeared in sky and was seen by the army of Bolsheviks that seriously outnumbered the Polish army. During the war with Bolsheviks, where Poland seems to be sentenced to fail, Poles managed to win and for some time stopped the dissemination of communism. A very important character in the history of Polish Catholic Church and Russia, Saint Andrzej Bobola, a Polish martyr, Jesuit. He was very well known in converting Orthodox worshippers into Catholic faith. He managed to convert very many people, and he was called the soul attractor because he converted so many people. That's why Cossacks at that time got furious and wanted to murder Andrzej. In 1657, he was brutally murdered, and it's one of the most drastic murders in Catholic saints. The perpetrators cut in his back a shape of the priest's tunic, then his body was pulled by horses and burned. He was tortured brutally for many hours. When he finally died, his body, so massacred, however, it still did not deteriorate. In 1922, the Bolsheviks stole his body from the church, took it to Russia, where the body was kept in a museum of atheism. It was ridiculed. They thought that after some time the body will deteriorate. Just the opposite. The body did not deteriorate. People started coming and praying, and they converted. And after some time, when there was a plague of hunger in Russia, in return for food, the Pope obtained the corpse of Bobola. He was acclaimed priest. He came to Warsaw, and today his body is in Warsaw. So if you are going to spend a couple of days here, you can visit the relics of Saint Bobola here. Another apparition during which the Holy Mother kept on asking for Consecration of Russia in Spain in 1929. The Holy Mother demonstrated to Lucia an incredible vision of the Holy Trinity. Once again, she asked for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. Holy Mother said, there comes a moment when God asks the Holy Father to make, together with the bishops of the whole world, and to consecrate Russia to my Immaculate Heart. In the words of the Holy Mother of the 13th of July, we hear, the good will be martyred. These words are very often repeated in the context of Fatima visions, and I wanted to show you a couple of examples of the good martyred in Poland. Very often you hear about the situation. When you hear about the World War II situation in Poland, quite often you hear about Nazi occupation, and not too much is said about the Soviet occupation that came from the East. And after 1945, Poland was not a free state. It was under control of the Soviets, and one of the persons that suffered the most in communism was one of the biggest Polish heroes, cavalry captain Witold Pilecki, who volunteered to Auschwitz. He was a man of incredible faith. He decided for this little mission to go to Auschwitz. He was there, he ran away, then he described his experiences from the concentration camp, and after the war he continued his mission and sent reports to the West in which he informed about the situation in communistic Poland. After a year of such activity, he was arrested, and for over a year he was imprisoned at Rakowiecka Street in Warsaw. And also today you can visit the prison and see the cell in which he was incarcerated. He was brutally tortured, and his wife, as a kind of testament, he gave a book on the persecution of Christ. He wanted his wife to read this book by herself and to their children, and his life motto, which also comes as a quote from the book: I try to live my way so that at the hour of death I may rejoice rather than fear. Witold Pilecki, in spite of the fact that he was not guilty, that he was innocent and heroically fought for Poland, he was sentenced for capital punishment. The sentence was executed, and today we don't know where his body was buried. Till today, the search is being continued. Another figure, not really well known even in Poland.
Sister Izabela Łuszczkiewicz, Zofia Łuszczkiewicz, and her name taken in the Klostrowa Izabela, a patriot that was also quite active during the Nazi occupation. The radio station in Heroism, where the Polish soldiers could have found a refugee. After the war, she was also involved in the anti-communistic conspiracy movement, and she was arrested because of that. She was also very brutally tortured. She was supposed actually to sign the documents saying that Doboszyński was the spy of Vatican, and he was spying for Pius XII. And there were also some words ridicule Pope. And Izabela said that she would never sign off such a false protocol of her hearing, because she said that the clean conscience was actually has been dearer to her than her life. Because of that fact that she didn't want to sign the documents, and the communistic regime wanted to actually use it in one of the court proceedings, she was because of that tortured. And few years after she spent actually in jail, she was freed up. She was only living for half a year, 6 months, because she was so weak that she died. Meanwhile, she managed actually to write the papers and write the book, memorizing the time that she spent in jail. In addition to beating squads in the number of up to the 2,000 at the same time, I also had so-called stand-ups. They consisted in the fact that during the winter and frosty days I stood barefoot on the concrete, only in my shirt, with my back to the window, and from that window they poured cold water on me. After 14 days and nights of standing like this, they did not allow me to sit down. I lost consciousness, and I woke up in the prison hospital. In this hospital, they started investigating me again. Another very important figure, Łukasz Ciepliński, who was in charge of the organization Liberty and Independence, the organization that was established to fight against communism, to fight for the Catholic Poland, independent Poland. And because of his activity, he was also arrested, and he was sentenced to death penalty, and he was killed on the 1st of March on 1951. From his cell in prison, he was writing letters to his son and to his wives using small handkerchiefs, and these letters were still available nowadays, and they are very moving. And this is just a section of one of the letters. These days I'm going to be murdered by the communists for fulfilling the ideals that I'm telling you in my last will. That's what he was writing to his son. They're going to take my life only, and this is not the most important thing. I'm glad that I'm going to be murdered as a Catholic for the Holy Faith and as a Pole for an independent and happy Poland, as a man for truth and justice. Today, more than ever, I believe that the idea of Jesus Christ will prevail and Poland will regain its independence, and disgraced human dignity will be restored. This is my faith and my great happiness. If you find my grave, you can write these words on it. Farewell, my beloved, I kiss you and I bring you to my heart. I give my blessing to the Queen of Poland, your father. Another figure, Władysław Gurgacz, the Jesuit father, for the whole life he was describing himself as servant of Saint Mary. He was also signing this way the pictures that he painted. The biggest dilemma, the biggest problem that he had referred to these times after the Second World War, the communistic occupation. Many young boys, young soldiers had to run away to the forests to be active in the underground army. They hoped actually that Poland would regain independence, and they had to actually disappear from the public life, otherwise they would be captured and killed. Father Gurgacz met the whole division of such young boys, 17, 20, 20 plus young boys, and they needed this kind of spiritual leadership, the holy sacraments and confession. The communists, because of the Father Gurgacz opinions that he might publish, he was also persecuted. So Father Gurgacz asked his asked the convent to let him go to the forest to work with these young boys. Unfortunately, the convent did not allow him. He, however, decided this is most important thing for him. He went to the forest. He was meeting these young boys. He was actually teaching catechesis and the holy religion, and he wanted to support these young boys. He was arrested then. Recently, there was the 70th anniversary of his death that we celebrated, and he, of course, he was sentenced when they caught him. The communistic press ridiculed his figure when they wanted to ridicule and jeer the Catholic religion. Many articles were actually wrote about him. When there was a death sentence already given, the Father Gurgacz said, I will gladly go to death. Well, it's only death anyway. I believe that every drop of blood shed will give birth to thousands of enemies, and it will turn to perdition. And this is the situation back then was difficult actually to understand, to comprehend. Even in Poland, many people still do not believe what really happened under the Stalin regime in Poland. These stories of Captain Pilecki only actually since few years they are taught. They have been taught at schools. Before that. These stories were kept silent. There was always propaganda telling that Russians came to Poland as those that were the liberators. So basically, we did not discuss all these topics. And this communistic government was constructed in such a way that we believe that these were Poles ruling the country, whereas, the Soviets were steering it from the backside. And these sentences they were also given by Soviets, by Russians and Jews, because they also cooperated with the communist regime. There were also, unfortunately, Poles who cooperated with communist regimes. They were actually bribed. Among the perpetrators, there were also some Ukrainians. So there was this big group of cooperators with the communistic regimes. On the other hand, we had a group of Poles who were fighting for the Catholic Poland with crosses on their breasts, on their hearts. So this is just a section of the illegal publication, Walka, the fight, that was first published in 1946. And here we see that this fight against communism was not only the political fight. On the first page of this newspaper, on this publication, we read, "We don't want actually that someone may tell that we offer to God the candle and the devil the candle. We chose Christianity, Catholicism, and we chose God. Therefore, we will not stop the fight against everything that belongs to God until the final victory over the enemy." So we see that this communist ideology fought religion in two ways. First of all, by promoting atheism and by tolerating all other religions. And this second method gained its popularity. Actually, instead of attacking Catholic religion, others, religions and the sects have been promoted and supported. From this room, you can see the symbol of communism in the center of Warsaw. This is the Palace of Culture and Science that was raised because of the Stalin's will. It was built in 1952 to 1955. It was designed by Russian architect Leo Rodnev. And actually, to make it possible to raise this building, because of course the Warsaw was completely destroyed after the war, so it had to be restored. But in that very place there were some other 80 buildings remaining. Some of them in a very good condition, some only half burned. It was enough actually to restore them. There was no need actually to demolish anything, but to make this building actually possible, to make this construction possible, they destroyed another 80 remaining buildings. So it was not only about the restoring Warsaw after the Second World War, but it was about more placing this communistic symbol in the center, in the heart of Warsaw, the symbol of the subordination of Poland to Soviet Union. Moreover, in 1959, there was a small emigration magazine, Voice of the Confederation, that came up with the ideas that on the top of the Palace of Culture, they should place a great statue of Our Lady. On the top of the Palace of Culture. So it was only the idea, it was not feasible, it was not doable. And this idea was actually mentioned by the Polish writer Józef Mackiewicz, and he considered that proposal a bit kind of compromise, because he said this would be a compromise between the communistic symbols and the Catholic symbols. Józef Mackiewicz later actually started to describe the Second Vatican Council and description of modernism that entered into Catholic Church. One of these of person who initiated the changes in the Catholic Church was the philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. When we talk about Poland, we often hear that in Poland, actually, Catholic religion was doing quite well vis-a-vis other Western countries that started to move away from the Catholic Church. In Poland, it was we had this center of opposition against the communistic regime. We may think that back then, actually, many people were allowed to believe in Catholic faith, but when it comes to Catholic doctrine and religion itself, there was no actually space to teach Thomism. The religion the church believed was the most precise by presenting the philosophical foundation of faith, and all publications of Teilhard de Chardin started to be published in 1989, and only then actually they stopped actually publishing his works. Teilhard de Chardin was a philosopher, a Catholic Jesuit, and he was the only priest whose publications can be found in the Museum of Atheism in Moscow. So that was the way that communists appreciated his work. And he often wrote that the church should be combined with Marxism ideology. So you see this shift of mentality of that already started to happen. And even though Poles were very religious people, they were going to church, the holy services were happening, but because of our focus on this new ideology, and because of the fact that majority of Polish intelligentsia actually died during the war or after, as a consequence of persecution after the war, that's why actually this modernism was not pointed out, and these changes in the church was happening quite slowly, unlike in the Western countries. Another topic that refers somehow to the topic of errors of Russia, it's worth mentioning because all the time in the West, whenever Poland is discussed, we hear the myth of Lech Wałęsa and the myth of the Round Table. We seem to believe that that was the event that led to the collapse of communism in Europe. We know today that this was not the case. In fact, this movement of solidarity that started to fight against communism had very good intentions. However, later on, the communistic agent called T.W. Bolek, who started to lead this movement, and Lech Wałęsa later on received the Nobel Peace Prize. He was actually believed to be a hero, but now we know that Lech Wałęsa was a communistic agent. He became then later the president of Poland. So we know nowadays that the Round Table was only a compromise, and the real objective of the whole event of this Round Table was just to limit the changes and to keep Poland under the Soviet influence. The further later government of Jan Olszewski, who wanted really to bring true changes, was abolished quite quickly, and Lech Wałęsa was one of the key figures who wanted actually to abolish this government, do disclose all the government that wanted actually to reveal all the people who cooperated with the communistic regime. So now people who were around Round Table to a certain extent still are at power in Poland. Therefore, the situation of Poland in terms of politics is still complicated, but to be able to explain this, we would need another topic and another meeting, another opportunity, not necessarily the Fatima conference.
As you can see, areas of Russia are still present. They only assume a different form. Before we had this visible persecution of church, imprisonment, detainment of nuns and priests. Also in Poland, the church was persecuted by communists. Seminaries were closed down. Special institutions were established to promote secular views of the world, the so-called scientific views of the world. There was also a society for the promotion of secular culture, and other organizations were established. Today you have other forms. One of the forms of fight against religion and destruction of family are the so-called pride parades or marches of gays and lesbians, which unfortunately this year, well, we had very many of such events in all big Polish towns. And this year also we witnessed the profanation of the image of the mother of Jasna Góra. This is a very unique picture associated with very miracles, graces. Many life changes and conversions are associated with this image. The author of the painting is supposed to be Saint Luke, the apostle, and certain artists profaned the picture. The halo around the Holy Mother's head was replaced by the symbol of LGBT movement, the rainbow. Then the picture was widely promoted through social media. And now if you juxtapose it with the words of the Holy Mother, who said about blasphemies and the denomination of first Saturdays, she talked about the offenses that outrage her directly in her holy images. So all the time you witness it in Poland. However, the Holy Mother said that at the end my Immaculate Heart will triumph. So apart from all the activities that I mentioned before associated with the demolition of church and the demolition of family, in Poland you have more and more spontaneous activities that are aimed at restoring Catholic traditional faith, promotion of rosary. Recently we have the action called the Rosary on Polish Borders, and a week ago, in a very spontaneous way, in Warsaw we had the Rosary March without any real promotion. The march attracted around 1,000 of people. The objective of the march was to pray for the restoration for all the sins associated with pride parades and the sacrilege associated with the offense of the image of the Holy Mother. And here the prayer was intended to regret the Holy Mother. Very interesting thing. Just a week before today's Fatima conference, such a march was organized in the center of Warsaw. And we can only hope, brothers and sisters, that the Immaculate Heart of Mary will triumph in Poland and around the globe, and Russia finally will be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And what Our Lady of Fatima asked for will be finally satisfied. Thank you very much.